Hi, Helen. Fantastic to have you here today.
Hi, Nat. It's so lovely to talk to you as well.
Thank you for agreeing to be interviewed to celebrate World Social Media Day.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I've always loved social media since it started. I've been active on social media, but it was only a few years ago when I stepped away from corporate and started my own company that I actually started using it for my business. There's so much that I didn't know that I know now, and
Yeah.
I absolutely love Instagram. Out of all the social media and things out there, Instagram is just the one for me because I'm a very visual person and I'm really creative. So I love the expression of it. I really enjoy posting and I take a lot of inspiration from other people. So for me, it was a very natural way to gravitate towards using Instagram.
And what did you find most interesting from being a fan of Instagram and using it for personal use, then using it for business?
I think the main difference is considering every bit of content you put out there, what's the purpose for it? And it's not be too much about you. You know, you want to show your personality. It's your page and run it how you want. There's so many different ways to do it. So it's finding what works for you, but it's remembering that it's not about you. It's about serving your clients. So showing up for them, getting inside their heads really and understanding what it is that they want to hear from you today, what's going to motivate them, what's going to inspire them, what's going to help them, what's going to give them the most value, and showing up with that attitude every day rather than this is my agenda, this is what I want to talk about, because then it loses its purpose of social media. It's not a flat website where it's just this is what I do, this is who I am. You know, that's so different. You need to keep in mind all the time you want people to interact with you, you want to build relationships.
Yeah. And how do you think Instagram has changed this year or even in the last 12 months?
There are a lot of changes. Staying open to that and keeping up with what the changes are and embracing them. So, you know, they have been a little misleading with some of their messages recently about what they're pushing. The head of Instagram puts out a lot of messages and the next day sometimes there's a bit of a backtrack and it can become a little bit confusing. So they definitely want you to be more original. So trying to think of those things again, it's more about you putting your personality into things. So it's a shift away from the kind of polished professional photos and a bit of text underneath. It's got to be much more real and much more authentic and relatable. People sharing the highs and lows more as well, but still being positive. Because for me, you know, it's got to be a very positive place.
How would you recommend they go about that?
So it's about showing more of yourself. But if you lounge around the house in a tracksuit, for example, and don't get up till midday, that's not really going to inspire anybody. It's kind of finding the balance. It's still putting effort into who you want to inspire your ideal clients towards. This is where the strategy comes in, really. It's being a little bit more strategic. I think it's quite easy with Instagram. You can have fun with it, but you do need to have a strategy. You do need to think about your pillars. What do you want to talk about? What do you want to be known for? Repeatable messages that you keep talking about so that when people see you and your brand, they're like, oh, that's the girl who's always going to talk about visibility on Instagram, or that's the one that's always going to talk about this. So that it builds. And then when you're putting an offer out, they know what you're about and they know what you're going to talk about. It is being strategic, but without looking at trying to make it seem a bit effortless.
Yeah. So it's all about the planning. You can't just wing it. You can't just turn up and post and run when you want to.
No, I don't think so. Everyone's got different opinions and different things work for different people. But as a rule of thumb, I would say consistency and having a strategy and not just winging it, you know, is the way to grow.
And talking about being consistent, how many times do you think a business needs to post? And also, it would be good for you to explain what you mean by consistency. And you've done very well on Instagram. What would be your top tips?
So consistency, there was a lady I heard speaking recently. She's got 1.9 million followers and she posted to get her figures up from something like 10,000 followers to build to that million. She posted 10 times a day, which, you know, it was like, how on earth? I couldn't imagine. I've gone through phases where I've posted 2 or 3 times a day, and that's pretty max, you know, that's the maximum I think I could ever manage. But when I looked at her content, a lot of it is like inspirational quotes and things like that. So you can bulk edit those and you can schedule them. So she said that grew her massively, because if you think if someone's posting 10 times a day, they're on your feed every time you open it. And the more you look at them, the more they're going to be on your feed next time you open it, you know, and maybe you even share it to your friend. So I do think the more you post, the more you'll grow. But it depends what your strategy is, because what's really your purpose? Because I know people who have grown massive amounts of followers, but they're not making any sales. You know, there's inspirational quotes that people might look at and be, oh, that's great. But, you know, if you haven't got the sales bit nailed, it's a bit of a waste of time, really.
Yeah.
I mean, you've built your community, which is great. So maybe when you flip over to the more salesy stuff, then you've already got your audience. So that is a good way. And that's why some people do it that way round. But it depends if you've got the time to do that, to invest where you're not going to make any money because you're just growing your audience. And then do they fall off when you do start to sell, because that's not what they're following you for?
Yeah. And how do people make that flip, going from brand awareness and growing their community to then making sales?
Something I always work on with my clients is their product suite. It starts with a freebie. So you want to give something of really good value. So I have a freebie at the moment, which took me ages to create. It's like 47 pages. It's really value packed, because I've done things before. People had said you can just do a, one pager. And again, I'm sure it works for some people, but for me personally, and it might have been the energy I put behind it, because it didn't take me very long to produce, I probably wasn't really pushing it. Whereas this thing that I poured my heart and soul into, when I talk about that, I think people can really feel that. So, it does incredibly well. So then you're building that trust with people, and you've given a lot. Their eyes are on you because they know that they're going to get a lot from you. Either they'll immediately just want to work with you. They're like, right, I love this person, I want to work with them in whatever your sort of, for me, it's one-to-one clients, whatever your kind of top tier offering is. Or, you can have some smaller offers along the way. So I've got recorded courses that are, around the £50 mark. So that's quite a nice kind of try before you invest kind of thing. So again, like £50, you don't have to remortgage your house or anything. It's a kind of almost throwaway bit of money you can take a bit of a risk on. So that works quite well as a stepping stone as well. So it's giving your clients that initial value, and then different sort of stepping stones into sort of where you want to, where you can really help them.
Yeah. And what is more important, or what have you found more effective? Reels, stories, or posts? That's the thing with Instagram. There is just so much to the platform. It is an absolute beast.
Yeah, there is. I know. Look, if people that are new to it, and they think it's going to be quite easy. I've got friends who, sort of like, oh, I'm going to start on Instagram, and then, a few weeks later, they're like, oh my God, there's so much I didn't know. So carousels weren't really being pushed by Instagram. They do say that they're going to start prioritizing them again. So carousels, what I mean by that, for people that don't know, are their swipe across. They're static. You can either have a single post, or you can have multiple where you encourage the user to swipe across. So they're very, very good for information, because you can get a lot of text on them. You can also you can embed videos onto them, so you can have a bit of a mixture of different things within them. So they're really good, and I will always use those when I'm launching an offer, because you can get the title graphic. I usually put a meme in there, so it's sort of relatable. You can put the price if you want to be transparent with your pricing. You can put, so then reels, there's no denying the fact that reels are the ones that get the eyes on them. You can get a lot of new followers through reels. You can get a lot of views on a reel. You can get a lot of interaction and questions. So reels still are the top thing, really. And stories are where you sell. So, it's give value in the grid post and then sell on the stories. So I don't think people necessarily want to be sold to in the grid, but if you use your stories and get quite interactive with things, I think people like that sort of short form on there.
And how do people measure success of Instagram? Because it is an area that businesses really struggle to understand, and quite often they'll look at what I say are more vanity metrics in terms of the number of followers, and obviously everyone's got a different idea of what constitutes a good amount of followers.
Yeah, it does. There's people that have got over 10,000 followers that aren't not making any income. So I've got around just over 2,000 followers, and it kind of stays around that point. It's growing slowly, but for me, it's more about really sort of optimizing the followers that you have got. So making sure that they're active and they're not just, there's a lot of game playing on Instagram. There's people that follow you for a follow back. And then unfollow you the next day. It gets a bit silly with its sort of game. So, and obviously there's other coaches that will follow coaches to support them, which again is nice, but they're not people that are necessarily going to buy from you. But then don't rule it out, because they may well do. So coaches always work with coaches, so it's not to be ruled out. But it's not so important about the numbers. But if you haven't got many followers, you haven't got many people looking at your work, so it is important to grow. But I think really anything over 1,000, get to 1,000, I think you're in a safe zone that people are going to start to take you seriously. They know you've done something right to get 1,000 people following you, and it's easier to grow from that point. I think the first 1,000 is quite hard.
Do you work with businesses on their mindset as well? And we know that it is a really difficult thing for a lot of people to overcome, to show up on social media and to show their face. What tips and advice would you give someone that is absolutely petrified at the thought of doing that?
So I would always say start small. So there's smaller things you can do, like going live on Instagram is scary. Personally, I don't like Instagram lives anyway. I'm not a fan. I prefer to record something, that people can then sort of choose to go away and look at. It's a case of doing what feels comfortable, whether that's talking over a video, doing like the small things and building on that. One of the biggest blockers that I definitely find with my clients, that they want to show up on social media, and then when they go to do it, we have so much fear of being judged by people. I mean, I've been through it myself. I think most people on some level go through what so-and-so going to think, or what are they going to say. It's even like, how we look, which is massive for women. What are people going to think? All these things suddenly come crashing in, and then people just don't end up actually doing it. So start by doing a voiceover. So you can do a video and just put, you can even introduce something. You could say my 5 tips for showing up online or something, just your voiceover, and then go into a video, of something you'd recorded, like the sort of B-roll kind of stuff that you haven't actually acted out on screen. But a lot of my stuff is B-roll, kind of me walking around the place, just with words on the top of it. Something also which is good is to mock interview. So set up as if somebody is recording you, or you could set up as if you were doing a Zoom call with somebody and record that, because you automatically don't feel the pressure then of sitting, talking, looking at the camera. You can be more relaxed, make it a little bit like an acting assignment, taking little steps, because I think sometimes, we don't need any more pressure on us. You try to remember that this gets to be fun, or it gets to be what you want it to be. So I would say to people, don't build it up too much in your head. People are not as interested in your content as you are. Remember, people are just flicking through Instagram. You're lucky if they stop and actually watch one of your videos to the end. Most of mine are like 5 to 7 seconds, and any longer people lose interest.
And last question, I promise. What are the most common mistakes that you see on Instagram?
Doing things that don't feel authentic. You can tell if somebody's, obviously there's like fake it till you make it is a saying, but I think there's fake it till you make it, and there's you can see that sort of fakeness. You find what feels comfortable for you. If it's like we said about consistency, I do think like every day is a good rule of thumb. I try, I do show up on put a reel out every day, or a carousel, sometimes more, but because it just keeps you on people's feeds, and it keeps people seeing that you're active, and you've got to be yourself. If that's going to be too much for you, a lot of people have a day job and then they're trying to build their business alongside whilst they're starting up. So if it's not going to work for you, then don't do it, because it will become overwhelming, and that can just stop you altogether. If people are saying to succeed on Instagram, you've got to do X, Y, Z, if any of that makes you feel like, really, I don't want to get I don't love controversial opinions. I'm not somebody that feels comfortable sharing something that's going to offend people or cause, you know, some sort of controversy, but a lot of people will, because that gets the comments. But that's not for me personally. It's just remembering where your values are, what sits right with you, and what's manageable as well.
There's so many tips and fantastic advice there that many of us can now think, yeah, definitely gonna do this, you know, from tomorrow. So thank you so much for your time.
Oh, you're welcome. It was lovely talking. You've